I awoke feeling even worse than when I had fallen into bed. The soreness in my body had escalated to stiffness. I groaned aloud as soon as I realized I was no longer sleeping. I would take my chances with the armies in my dreams. I could hear people shuffling outside my door. I was somewhat surprised that I had even managed to wake up at my usual hour, considering how late I had been up and how exhausted I felt. It was all I could do to roll off the bed and stumble out of my room to join everyone for service. I could barely stay awake through the whole thing, which made me feel wretched. I had already forgone praying the full set of the hours. If I could not even make it through these compromised services, who was I? Hedwig! How are you feeling? How on earth could she be so chipper after a night like ours? Fading, I must admit. She giggled and offered a sympathetic expression. I gave her a perfunctory smile back and took off in the direction of the Superior's office for our requested meeting. I made it there before the Superior did. She was a few minutes behind me, no doubt the last to leave the chapel. Goodness, Hedwig, you know you can always skip morning service if you feel ill. I'm quite all right. She unlocked the door and ushered me inside hastily. So, yes, your Superior? I do hope that you have some news for me, even with your little tumble. Yes, as a matter of fact. She nodded with faint approval and urged me to sit down. I did so gratefully. She in turn sat in her grand chair. I was able to ask Catherine about the tunic. She can vouch for James. Well, that's fantastic news. What did she say? How did you approach the subject? Well, as the evening wore on, things got looser and looser. I simply asked the question at an opportune time. In my head, I was navigating through a thick fog. I was unsure how much information to divulge to the Superior to spare her the embarrassment of hearing it, and me the embarrassment of having to say it. Is that all? You seem a little worse for wear. I heard whispers of things getting rather heated. How so? Well, Angela was in here complaining about something or other at one point. Yes, there was a bit of a kerfuffle at one point. I see. She finds making friends rather difficult, I am aware. Is that all? Nothing relevant, no. She raised an eyebrow. No, actually, that's not true. Eustace knocked on the door at one point later in the evening, dressed as a ghost, and waggled a sword at me as some sort of mean-spirited joke. And then I slapped her across the face quite hard, and then I think Flora might be plotting to run away, which would be horrible. We have to help her see reason. And then after the evening fell apart, I couldn't sleep, and I went for a walk to clear my head. But I saw someone walking towards the hospitalum, and I followed them, and it was Catherine, and I heard her talking to James, but I couldn't quite hear what they were talking about. And then I ran all the way back in the dark and collapsed on the path. And then Catherine found me, and that's when I really asked her about it, and she admitted it. The thing about the tunic, she said she saw him that day without one, and both of the Superior's eyebrows were raised now. Well, well, well. And then, yes. I realized I was panting. Nothing. Sorry, I got carried away. That's everything. So Catherine spoke with James in the middle of the night. How odd. I fear that this does not allay my suspicions. No? He claims Catherine can vouch for him about this tunic of his that is supposedly able to clear his name. But if they are conspiring in secret, how do I know the whole idea wasn't simply concocted out of thin air? I suppose there's no way of knowing. I applaud your investigation work, but I'm afraid this puts us right back where we started. Not without further corroboration, anyway. As is, this is tainted testimony at best. I had a strong suspicion that Catherine had been telling the whole truth to me last night. She had been very reluctant to speak on it, and her strong hints in this very office that the embarrassing truth was my secret to keep did not feel like they were part of some grander lie. Surely, if that was the case, she would be spreading the lie farther afield, but I couldn't bring myself to tell the Superior. It was embarrassing, it was based entirely on my personal feelings, and if by some small chance Catherine was capable of murder, I would not want to make myself her next target. Tainted testimony in particular, given Catherine's circumstances. Unless there's another detail here that makes you find this story more believable. I have reneged on my promise to Catherine to not speak a word of the night's events to anyone else already. But something else was keeping me from sharing the final, perhaps critical element of her story. I felt dirty just thinking about it, and did not want to even imagine what Catherine might do if she suspected that I had blabbered about her liaisons with James. Especially, I remembered with a shiver, while she still had access to the sword. Even if she was innocent of Catherine's murder, I worried I might become her next victim if I used this information against her. Hedwig, tomorrow I would like you to travel to the village with some companions. These words felt like a cold bucket of water. The village? Indeed. Do not worry, as I said, you will not be alone. I realize it will be a new experience. Catherine will be included, I presume? Oh, goodness, no. Moira and Eustace, that would be fine. Not Eustace, please. Now, we can't have you two falling out over this. You must work together. I'm sure I do not need to remind you that you must maintain a healthy relationship with everyone. Must I? Of course. For heaven's sake. Don't complain, it's not that often someone gets to go down to the village. A trip out with Eustace might do both of you some good. Get some fresh air with your compatriots, and commiserate over a change of scenery. It was not that long ago she was in here speaking quite highly of you, I might add. Well, what is it we would be doing in the village? There are people there who would be able to provide some insight into how seriously we should take James and Catherine's insistence. Goodness, it's a shame you weren't able to hear what they were talking about. It would save us a lot of time. I weighed my options. As stressful as it was to imagine, I decided that a trip beyond the bounds of the Abbey would be preferable to risking Catherine's rage. Besides, the Superior seemed quite adamant about the idea. I shouldn't have followed her in the first place. I certainly wouldn't have suggested it, but it was brave of you. You're certainly beginning to think on your feet. Perhaps the chess lessons are helping. Quite possibly. Anyhow, knowing that Catherine and James are in communication complicates things, but perhaps we can glean some idea of whether she knows something and is helping James out of guilt, or if something more sinister is going on. I'm afraid I don't follow. Hedwig, do you not know why Catherine left the comfort of the village? She did mention it last night in the Misericorde. Something about local politics? She offended the wrong person or something like that? The Superior let out a surprising chortle. I see. Well, I suppose that is not untrue. Still, I am rather surprised. I would have expected the rumors around her to be one of the first things you heard. What rumors? That Sister Catherine murdered her husband. I nearly choked on air. What? The Superior held up a hand gently. I do not believe it for an instant, to be clear. In fact, I think it's very likely that this is precisely the kind of story the people she expressed contempt for would concoct to harm her reputation. She was in a competitive business, you understand. Or rather, her husband was. I tried my very best to keep up with the conversation, although my throat felt bone dry. It was difficult to get the words out. And what was that? The vineyard, of course. You might see it on your way down the mountain. It's a particularly good one, I might add. At least for this country. All of our wine uses grapes from the slopes of Lindbergh. So you think that her husband just died and she was blamed? I have no proof, but it's more believable than her killing someone. But this is Sister Catherine we are talking about. The Sister Catherine of a few years ago, at least. No. Her story is that the man fell down the stairs, and some unscrupulous hawk saw an opportunity to stop her from inheriting a fortune. So in the village, speak with the townsfolk. I'm curious how they feel about Catherine now. Perhaps there is a pattern we have overlooked. I thought you believed Catherine. Surely this is a waste of time. I do believe that Catherine is innocent of murdering her husband, but I must confess it is purely a gut feeling. Poke around for me, see if there's any evidence to support that claim. It would be good to show the bishop some support from a source who is not also accused of a similar crime. You're worried Catherine and James are conspiring. You think they might have killed her? What, together? Thanks to your intrepid investigation last night, we can no longer rely solely on them vouching for each other. We have a responsibility to follow up on their connection, no matter how I feel. Perhaps I've been played for a fool. We'll concoct a simple cover story for your visit, bringing some Finnish wine or some other goods to share, perhaps. My heart sank. I just put Catherine in harm's way, it seemed. Although, perhaps I was in harm's way around Catherine. This was all too much to keep in my head at once. Just say it, a voice inside my head murmured. Just tell the Superior that Catherine has been... What should I ask? Who should I speak to? Just speak to whomever will give you their time. Bring the topic up carefully. And just get a sense. A sense? A sense. Anyway, this is good. We are making progress. You're doing quite well for yourself, I must say. You're quite resourceful. Thank you. But does Eustace have to come with us if I'm really going on this village trip? As I said, it sounds like an opportunity to mend whatever bridge between you has already broken. I see no reason to keep you apart. All I could do was sigh. I was pouting just a little, I will admit. I will meet you halfway. I shall send the word to both Moira and Eustace for you, so you will be spared at least one awkward conversation. Fair enough? Thank you. She sighed and rested her chin on her hand. Sometimes I wonder how I manage. It sounds like you could pen a whole book about the drama happening beneath my station this week alone. I look forward to reading your chronicles one day. It's not so bad. So I thought, until... well... She made a cutting gesture across her neck with a grim expression on her face. Do you know what snitches get, Hedwig? I'll give you a hint. It rhymes with snitches. I used to think it was good to let these things be and let the sisters sort things out amongst themselves, but... Could I have prevented Catherine's murder if I had taken a more active interest in the whispers that would stop after I turned the corner? Well, surely I don't know. I do not like meddling. And now circumstances have conspired such that I must meddle greatly through you, alas. I noticed the faintest whiff of wine on her breath as she exhaled a deep sigh. Yeah, that's... I'll have our cross to bear, am I right? I'm afraid I'm in no state for chess this morning. Have a productive rest of your day, Sister Hedwig. I stood up from my chair and clasped my hands together, holding them out half-heartedly. Thank you, Mother Superior. I will endeavor to do so. She nodded and beckoned to the door. I left swiftly. I could feel the pressure building in my head beginning to match the aching of my body. I groaned aloud and rolled my head around my shoulders. It was a lovely morning, at least. A wispy cloud of fog had settled over the grass in the cloister, and sunbeams reflected out of it at pleasing angles as I walked past. Hedwig, dear, good morning. Marta and Charity were seated in wooden chairs at the edge of the grass, looking perfectly relaxed. I smiled wearily and waved at Marta, who beckoned me closer. In trouble, are we? Oh no, the Superior just wanted to report on how I was feeling. I fainted last night, on my way to the privy. Oh dear, we had quite a night, didn't we? Charity's been telling me all about it. There was a dark glint in her eye that I did not altogether appreciate. I feel ashamed. Don't be. Lord knows I've wanted to smack Eustace more than once. She could be a pompous little thing, and she deserves it for scaring you girls witless. Still, I didn't know you had it in you. Nor her, for that matter. I had no idea either. I've never struck anyone before. I abhor violence. Huh. Don't we all until it suits us? Just try not to make a habit out of it. She says as if she never did. My fighting days are behind me, I'm afraid. It is much more difficult to bring people upright with only harsh words. I've tried hitting some sense into these women, and it hasn't taken. I've tried pleading with them about the virtues of living well, and it never stuck. I'm afraid, then, that I must instead simply appeal to your good nature, Hedwig. I don't want you to end up like Catherine. Oh, goodness, I apologize for offending you. Oh, you didn't. She didn't, did she, Marta? No, not at all. I'm just reminded of Catherine's flirtations with that particular kind of apologia. Nobody really abhors violence. I failed to turn the other cheek, as it were. As I would have as well in your position. Oh, Marta, you're just in one of your moods. I'm starting to realize I have been in one of my moods ever since Catherine was taken from us, and I'm not sure I will ever fully recover. As if that's your fault. Was it not? I gave up on her. Her gift for persuasion was too much for me. I let her get away with too much. Catherine's silver tongue stayed my hand too often. Do you remember when she locked Flora in that box? Oh, my, yes. Well, what happened? One day I went down to the cellars a little early, and I heard an alarming racket coming from one of the crates we used for packing wine bottles. I opened the lid, and what do I find inside? Poor little Flora, gasping for air, curled up so tight I had to enlist 2 sisters to help pull her out. It was a very strange morning. Flora, of course, would say nothing. She was very loyal to Catherine. Catherine, though, confessed to everything almost immediately. She admitted that it all was a practical joke that had gone too far, and that she hadn't known that the lid was too tight to let air in. Why on earth would she think to put Flora in there in the first place? Oh, God only knows. Flora adored Catherine, and they at least shared a wicked sense of humor. Flora was all right. She was beside herself for a day or two, and took it out on me, if you can believe it. Oh, goodness. Catherine thought that, or knew, I suppose, that she could get away with anything. But why did she confess so quickly, then? Oh, that's a good point. Why did she, Marta? You see, even in death, she can bargain her way out of scrutiny. She didn't admit to anything because she felt ashamed. She admitted it because she had already gotten away with it. Flora had already been found safely. No harm was done in Catherine's eyes. Another lesson avoided. Off she went her merry way with nothing but a minute's awkward conversation as penance. I think you're being a mite too harsh. Who would punish her? Not the superior. Lord knows nobody would break the unspoken agreement to cut her out of our affairs that Catherine orchestrated. Would I punish her? I should have. But no. It was too late by then. I was already under her spell. Punishing her wouldn't have changed what happened to her. Would it not? I don't know. I don't believe in random chance. All flowers were seeds sown. I could have shaped her into someone great. Instead, I gave up trying. Catherine is my greatest failure. I know you don't mean all that. I know you miss her. I do. Despite it all, I do. Charity had started getting glassy-eyed. Marta reached over to touch her plump wrist with her own bony fingers. Now, no getting wistful in front of poor Hedwig. I'm sure she has better things to do than to listen to 2 old bats whinge. Where are you off to, Hedwig? There's another chair around here somewhere. Behind you. Oh, I'm off to the library, actually. Marta's dark mood certainly hadn't sold the idea as the most appealing way I could imagine spending my morning. Chronicling can wait, surely. It's not like you're going to forget last night anytime soon, eh? In the end, I did not need much convincing. The longer I could put off running into Eustace, the better, even if Marta was feeling particularly sour. I brought the spare chair over and sat down for more conversation. So, aside from last night's escapade in the Misericorde, how have you been doing? Very well, very well. I mean, there's a lot to get used to, but I'm adjusting. Is there anything still confusing you about the outside world? Oh, loads, I'm sure, but I'm carrying along. Story of my life, sister. I did learn that there was a war going on, and that was quite a shock. Oh, that old thing feels like it's been going on most of my life. Used to be quite a bit more of a worry, but these days it's exhausting to even think about. It was a little more concerning when, good lord, Hexham was well over 20 years ago now, wasn't it? And Hedgley. We were a little more worried when those were going on. A bit closer to home those were. You would have been here in 64, Hedwig? Just about, I think. Were you as well? I did not like talking about myself. Not far. I was at the Abbey across the alley down the hill. Bourne Grove. I moved around a lot in those days. Durham, Richmond, Ripon. What side of the war are we on? I wouldn't worry about that. You'd be hard-pressed to find any strong opinions on the war here, I'd reckon. They're fighting over who gets to be king. That's well above my opinion. The church is above all these things. These are petty, worldly squabbles in the end. Even though the royal bloodline is anointed by God? That may be so, but men have found so many ways to bicker over the specifics of what God has said. Too right, too right. What about you, Charity? Have you always been here at Lynborough? For a long time, yes, but not forever. I got my start at Bourne Grove, actually, and followed Marta here when she got transferred. We were too good of friends not to go together, isn't that right? Marta had a thin smile on her face. Oh, what a nice story. Indeed. Have you been making many friends with the girls your age? The girls. This felt like a patently ridiculous way to describe a group of women I assumed were mostly in their 20s and 30s, but perhaps I'll understand when I'm Marta's age. I worry I'm losing more than I am making. I'm sure that's not true. I know for a fact Moira is quite taken with your presence. And Darcy, for that matter. And we don't invite just anyone to sit with us. Well, that's right. I smiled and leaned back in my chair. It was hard to get comfortable when my body still felt bent completely out of shape. Well, thank you. I should probably get to work. Godspeed. We're on your side. God bless her, but it was a mean thing Eustace did. I stood up slowly and offered Charity an appreciative smile as I left. I made my way upstairs, dreading what the rest of my morning was going to look like with Eustace across the room from me. But it turned out she was not there. Either she had finished her work while I had been dawdling, or she had let her own discomfort get the better of her and do what I wasn't strong enough to do, and simply not show up. I sighed and sat down at my desk. I opened up the massive book I was filling with my daily chronicles, but I was unsure of what to write. The amount of delicate pruning I would have to do made it difficult to know how to begin at all. Against my better judgment, I was not about to commit Catherine's sin to writing, and I didn't particularly want to immortalize my altercation with Eustace. Or did I? I considered that extolling these sins might take some of their weight from my shoulders. If I was not being entirely truthful to those around me, I could at least be truthful to myself and God. I was being changed in many ways outside my cell, but I did not want to become a liar. I was no liar, I told myself. I was no thief. I scratched my quill against the page idly as I debated myself in my own head. So quiet in the library that the sound seemed to fill the room. It didn't help me decide. As Charity had said, it wasn't like I was about to forget any of this. I closed the book and stood up. I, at least, had the wherewithal to recognize when no work was about to get done. Eustace still hadn't shown up. I looked towards the bookshelves, the ones that seemed to stretch on forever into the darkness. Without Eustace here, could I... No. Hurt as I was by her cruel game of dress-up, I had no intention of exacting any more revenge upon her. Slapping her was already beyond the pale. Breaking her library rules would just be petty. Wouldn't it? I found myself in argument with my own reasoning again. They were just books. What right did she have to tell me what to do? Was I so cowed by her that I feared what she might do if I touched her precious books? Set one of them out of order? Oh, hello. Darcy had shuffled into the library, carrying a long hooked staff that I could only assume was a shepherd's crook. Oh, hello, Darcy. Can I help you? Well, actually, Eustace sent me. Ah. She is feeling under the weather and can't make it to the library today. That's quite all right. I understand. She suggested I take you with me to watch the sheep today. Oh, well, I have work to do still, actually, but... Don't worry about that. You can always do it tomorrow. I'm not always in charge of the sheep. You don't want to miss this. It's sheep, Hedwig. Sheep. I don't know how else to explain this to you. Come on. It's time for sheep. I couldn't say no to her. Especially after what Charity had said earlier. All right, then. Darcy beamed and beckoned for me to follow her. We went down the stairs toward the cloister. Charity and Marta had left, presumably to go check in with the wine in the cellars. The sunlight was somewhat diminished. The fog was gone, but I could now see rain clouds gathering ahead. We took a right at the bottom of the stairs and continued past the rectory and kitchens. It's a bit of a hike if that's all right. Oh, is it? I'm quite stiff today, I'm afraid. Have you been to the hospitalum? It's more or less the same distance, but this direction. No, I haven't. More lies, but it was either that or explain to Darcy that I had sprinted from the hospitalum late last night. What was that I said earlier about not being a liar, though? It occurs to me, how much of this can I actually believe? Let's find out. I'm sure I'll manage, though. We left through another archway in the surrounding wall. I was beginning to wonder what the point of the Abbey wall was in the first place. Anyone, it seemed, could come from either direction if they fancied it. For a moment, I wondered if it was worth telling the Superior that it would be impossible to fairly accuse anyone of murdering Catherine when just about any old pervert could have walked into this place. Darcy had not been exaggerating about the walk. On this side of the Abbey, there were no gentle slopes and hillocks. There were hills, and for the first time it truly struck me that Lynnborough Tor was more or less a mountain range. As we made our way over impossibly green grass, wind whipped our robes around. I think Darcy may have been trying to chat, but it was impossible to hear anything clearly over the gusts of wind and flapping fabric. It was truly dizzying up here. I could see the village and the lake as I did on the way to the hospitalum, but they were truly dwarfed by the hills surrounding them. It was beautiful and terrifying. I had never felt so small. Eventually, we crested a particularly sharp incline and paused for a breather. Hands on my knees, doubled over to catch my breath. I noticed a smattering of little white dots against the dark green grass of the slope across from us. There they are. Sheepies! We pressed onward. Eventually, the hill smoothed out to more of a manageable degree. By the time we approached the grazing sheep, the land was practically flat. It was as if we were on a tiny shelf on the side of the hill. All right, then. This is my favorite job. You have so many responsibilities. How do you manage? Well, that's true. But to me, this is hardly a responsibility. Just look at them. She gestured toward the sheep, who had all turned to look at us. They were all chewing grass and seemed to be regarding me with the same kind of disinterest I generally expected from the sisters. They're a bit scary. What? I've never seen any animal up close. There's so many of them. They're sheep. They're nice. Look, that one already likes you. She pointed behind me with her crook. Sheepy! I turned around and yelped. One of the sheep was standing right next to me, looking up at me while continuing to munch on grass. Hey, what's up? You could touch them if you like. No, I shan't be doing that. Give it a try. One of the sheep had approached her, and she was patting it on the head gently. I wouldn't say the creature appeared to be enjoying it, but at the very least, it wasn't attacking Darcy over it. I held my breath and reached a hand out to touch the sheep closest to me. Hello. I rubbed the top of its head. It didn't really seem to care one way or the other, but I hadn't lost any fingers. So what do we do? This. We just stand out here? Yes. We just want to make sure nothing attacks them or eats them. What would do that up here? Wolves. The word sent a chill up my spine. That's terrifying! It would be, but not many wolves around here anymore. I've not seen a wolf in a very long time. And just from afar at that. That's comforting. It was not comforting at all. Knowing my luck, I felt like we would be doomed to be torn to ribbons by the first pack of wolves Darcy had ever seen up close. Just enjoy them and get some of this lovely fresh air. Delicious air. We were sheltered from the wind on this side of the hill, and the air was cool and damp. The rain clouds, however, still threatened above us. In fact, as soon as Darcy had finished encouraging me to take in the fresh air... Wow. This isn't rain, this is God pissing on us. Well, would you look at that? I couldn't help but laugh. Yes. Just our luck. Just our luck. To be honest, I quite like the rain. I could not remember the last time I had been outside in the rain. In my cell, I had always left the window hatch open a crack when it began to rain, just to catch a bit of the fresh scent that followed. Sometimes I would stick my hand out just to get my hand wet, just to feel something curious and different. I felt so thankful every time I caught a few raindrops in my palm to be alive. Or whenever I felt a sunbeam hit my back, hunched over my writing desk. Or when I would catch a fleck of snow and watch it melt into the creases of my skin. That had been enough. That had always been enough for me. I'd never wanted to leave. I would have been happy for my whole life in that little room as long as I could see the rain outside my window. I was glad it was raining. I did not want to have to explain the tears rolling down my cheek to Darcy. I like the rain too. Finally, someone else who agrees. Well, let's get these little beasties out of the rain, shall we? Darcy began to gently shoo the sheep around with her staff. She pointed at a rickety wooden structure near the slope of the hill. Try and get them over there. I had no idea what to do, especially without a crook of my own. I sort of gestured at the sheep around me, I guess. Sheep! Go be sheep! Sheep ho! Maybe politeness would serve me where physicality couldn't. Come along, please. Thankfully, it seemed like the flock didn't need me to tell them what to do. Most of the sheep were trotting towards Darcy's structure of their own accord. A few stayed huddled in front of me. I wondered if they were pretending to be herded for my benefit. Look, this bitch is completely hopeless. Like, let's just do her a solid on this one. I made it under the wooden shelter just as it started pouring. Darcy was leaning against her crook, surveying the hills in front of us with a serene expression. I navigated through several nonplussed sheep to stand next to her. Good work. So, have you been coming out here every day? Oh goodness, no. I like to do it, but I'm very busy. Moira does it sometimes, and also I think Margaret. Catherine would as well. Our Catherine? That's hard to imagine. Catherine II. Ah. They aren't our sheep, strictly speaking. We just like to volunteer, but they are from the village. This is just where they come for transhumans. What's that? Oh, well, you have to rotate where sheep graze depending on the time of year. Normally that man James would handle most of the shepherding up here, but, well, you know. Oh, he's the accused, yes? Yes. How horrible. There was a pregnant pause. Do you think he killed her? I couldn't say. Angela found him trying to run from the abbey, and his cloak was covered in blood. I found it. Did you know that? I didn't even know anything bad had happened. I was busy putting out a fire in the dormitory and only noticed the cart in the distance out of the window. A fire? This was the first I had heard of this detail. Yes. Someone had put too much fuel in the fireplace and was blowing embers around. More of a nuisance than a danger, but it was getting out of hand. Anyway, all the evidence points to James being a little bastard, but strange things happen around here. I'm wary of how simple it all seems. Like people dressing up as ghosts, you mean? This slipped out before I could register how barbed it sounded. Eustace was Darcy's close friend, and I realized any story Darcy had been told about last night would have been from Eustace's bespectacled perspective. I was relieved then when Darcy let out a guttural chuckle. What am I gonna do with you two? Is she very upset? She told me all about it and sounded very sad. And I told her, well, it did sound like what you did was a bit cruel, and then she got mad and went to sleep. She'll be fine, I think. Give it a few days. A few days? Maybe a week. I can't say for sure. Is that normal? Oh, are you not used to people being angry with you? I'm starting to worry that I will have to get used to it very quickly. Eustace gets angry very easily. I really would not put too much thought into it. She and Adela avoided each other for a month because Eustace said sherry tasted like trout water. And Adela said, well, how would you know what trout water tastes like? And then a few days later, Adela said that some of the beer we had at luncheon tasted like piss. And Eustace was ready with, well, how do you know what piss tastes like? Ha ha ha. Catherine made them have a sword fight over it. Wait, hold on. With wooden swords. Oh. Even still. Yes, Catherine was a bit obsessed with them. She tried to train all of us up as swordsmen at one point. Swords women. Sword women. However one might say it. Darcy just says words because they're fun to say. Told you she was a woman after my own heart. Why on earth would she do that? Well, as I am sure you have noticed, there are not many of us here. Yes. And did you know that there is a war going on? I had heard that. Well, Catherine wanted all of us to be able to defend ourselves, I suppose. Just in case. Oh, that's, well, rather extreme. That's what the superior said when she found out about it. I've heard a lot of stories about Catherine's interests, but I still would never have guessed that one. I think it made a certain amount of sense. By the way, it occurs to me, with the crook staff and with the potion bottle, like, Darcy kind of looks like a cleric from, like, an RPG, you know what I mean? Like, she looks like she wandered in from a fantasy game as opposed to being an actual nun. It was fun, but it made me a bit uncomfortable when I thought about it longer. I much preferred it when she was really into winemaking. Or sailing. Winemaking? Goodness, I take it Marta wasn't pleased with that. On the contrary, Marta was thrilled that someone was as interested in it as her. As far as I know, Marta taught Catherine everything she knew, and that got Catherine reading about more techniques and so on in the library. And then would tell Marta about that new stuff. Well, then one day it just stopped, I suppose. Stopped? The thing with Catherine. Darcy trailed off in an uncharacteristic manner that surprised me just as much as a sudden yelp would have. Catherine was unbelievably smart, but nothing ever satisfied her. She would become intensely passionate about a subject or idea for several days or weeks or months, and then it would change completely. Catherine loved many things aggressively, but it was always one thing at a time. If it was something similar to my interests, I was her best friend. If it wasn't, I felt like I barely knew her. I don't think I'm alone in that assessment. I miss her, but I sometimes think she was a bad friend. Not everyone will admit it, but I think a lot of us feel that we were at some point jilted by her random interests. One day you're the center of her attention, and the next day she goes off somewhere else, lavishing someone else with the care you thought was just for you. It sounds like she had a lot of love to give. She did. That's true. But she would give it so intensely, I cannot blame anyone for feeling... hard to choose a word here. Jealous? Jealous sounds so romantic. I think Catherine often gave people a sense of purpose, and then when she got bored or found a new subject to obsess over, that new outlook on life evaporated. Imagine being told you were actually destined to be a queen by someone who starts teaching you etiquette and explaining how to do diplomacy to you. And then one day, they're telling someone else the same story. Catherine liked to get us to plan for futures where we were musicians or knights or prophets, but at the end of the day, it was always pure imagination. She would have made a great poet, I think. I'm rubbish at poetry. Was anyone particularly put off by this? This is the first I've really heard about her habits being so controversial. Dunno. Some people minded, and some people minded less. Margaret was a bit stung when she started spending more time on theater than music, I think. And Angela had a big falling out with her, but I suppose that is not a big surprise. I was never bothered by it that deeply. It just made me a little sad sometimes. We were attached at the hip for a while, but then one day she started spending more time with Margaret and Moira. But that's okay. She was a savant, but I have my areas of expertise, and I'm quite happy with them. As well you should be. Your work in the garden is hard to put into words. Darcy beamed. And you seem to have a connection to God that I can only hope to achieve a fraction of. I saw you in the garden that day when Eustace was chronicling your vision. Wondrous. Oh, that. You know, it's interesting. That is exactly what Catherine said to me when we were close. You two spoke about visions? Well, yeah, she had them too. She wanted to compare them and examine them. We started working on tinctures together to try and enhance them. Then one day she just stopped. She saw the Aztec temple, she went too far. Stopped having visions? No, I don't think so. In fact, I remember having quite a vivid one. That is what Eustace told me, at least. Like I said, Catherine started spending much less time with me all of a sudden. Do you know what she saw? Darcy shook her head and leaned on her crook. She looked a little weary. I barely remember my own visions if Eustace isn't there to write them down. I'm not sure anyone was with Catherine when she had the big one. Whatever it was affected her deeply. So deeply that I never wanted to question it. At the time, I was worried I had upset her. It took her to a dark place, I think, whatever it was she saw. How horrible. We watched the raindrops fall in silence for a moment. An impatient sheep nudged my thigh. Nah. You know, it's funny. The vision I saw you have, it was completely true. True in what sense? Well, a lot of it sounded like nonsense at first, but you settled on fire, goat, right before you came back to us. Was that so? Yes, and that evening I saw, well, Eustace's little joke. Oh, by the way, I take it from the sound of things that my little concoction worked? Oh, yes! I suddenly remember the little potion I had downed before heading down to the Misericorde. Oh dear, did I drink too much of it? I ended up finishing all of it before the evening started. Do you think that's why I... smacked Eustace? No, I think the wine had probably taken over by that point. She looked over at me and offered a sympathetic smile. The rain was beginning to slow. Eustace will come around. I hope so. We do have to work together. You could always try apologizing first. Would that help? I wanted to last night, but maybe I should just leave her be. No right answer here. Do whatever feels right to you. I'll try. We urged the flock back out into the field once the rain cleared. The rest of our time there was spent in silence. I could occasionally hear Darcy cooing to one of the sheep, but for the most part, all I could hear was the wind and my own thoughts. I had heard so many things about Catherine now that I felt should have a complete idea of who she was. There were people in the Bible who I had less information about who I could nonetheless picture perfectly. What would they say if I had asked them certain questions? How would they react to different situations? But every time I felt like I was getting closer to knowing Catherine, my image of her was disturbed. It was as if I were staring into her reflection in a pond, but the surface was being pelted with pebbles. The sense of loss I had felt when the Superior had told me the news. The desire for justice I had felt that what kept me going after breaking my perpetual vow. Were these feelings based on a lie? Had I simply had the luck of being Catherine's newest obsession before she was taken from me? Could I even consider her taken from me? I thought about the copy of Medea hidden in my bedroom. What had Catherine's plan been for me? What else would she have told me to make me feel special? Would her visits to the Squint have suddenly ended one day, even if she hadn't died? I was feeling undeniably sour when it was time to leave. We corralled the sheep back into their barn, and then we hiked back to the Abbey in silence. I considered asking Darcy about her visions again. Asking Eustace to see her notes had been a dead end, and I was wickedly entertained by the idea of stepping over her to get what I wanted. A form of retaliation less violent and far more productive than a smack on the cheek. I thought better of it in the end. Thank you for your help, Hedwig. Oh, you're welcome. It was a nice change. Glad to hear it. She smiled and clasped her hands together. I had no idea how she could have any energy left to work, but I could scarcely finish my goodbye to her before she fluttered off in the direction of the kitchen. Supper that evening was a quiet affair. Nearly everyone seemed exhausted. I remembered that I was not the only one who hadn't gotten much sleep last night. Eustace did not look at me once during the entire meal. A small part of me hoped that she was going to disappear and return with pudding like she had the first time we had dined together, and revealed that her anger had been a front this whole time. The nuns trickled out one by one. I got up and stretched. I still felt incredibly stiff, and I realized that hiking out to the sheep and staying on my feet all day was not helping my recovery from last night's marathon. At the very least, I hadn't vomited and passed out today. Margaret and Flora were waiting for me when I left the rectory. Oh, hello. Hello, Hedwig. Flora's been in question of you. I'm not 5, you know. I was going to ask anyway. Is something wrong? No, just last night. Did you mean it when you said you'd teach me how to paint? I think she means, would you be free to teach me how to paint, please? Sure. That. I must admit that I had already forgotten this promise. I felt bad. Even under duress, I shouldn't have made a commitment I could ignore so easily just to make Flora feel better. I had absolutely no business teaching anyone to draw, and I desperately wanted to say no. However, yes, of course. Where would a good place be to meet? I don't know. The library? I thought about the clutter on the desks in the library. How about we just do it in the back in the rectory here? Well, the rectory is usually done in the back. There's a nice big table in there. Sure. Let's meet back here in a few minutes. I need to go and get my supplies. Flora nodded and skulked off in the direction of the dorms. I hadn't thought about it, but I was going to need access to my old cell. All of my illumination supplies, brushes, paints, ink were still in there. My heart sank. I started walking towards the Superior's office. I would need her key. Margaret followed. Thank you, Hedwig. I must admit I had forgotten all about it, but I'm happy to help. Likewise. She was hanging around me all morning and I was struggling to remember why. Then I remembered we had all had that little heart-to-heart last night. Oh my. Did you forget all about what happened? Oh no. How could I? Some details just took precedence over others. Right. She grinned. I should go check in on the cellars and make sure Adela and Marta haven't killed each other. Talk to you later, Hedwig. She broke from me at the staircase down to the cellars. I continued to the Superior's door and gave it a little knock. Oh, Sister Hedwig. Is something wrong? Not at all. I need you to unlock my cell. Whatever for? It's a long story, but I promised Sister Flora that I'd teach her about illuminating manuscripts. And I only just remembered that all of my tools and paints are still in there. Flora is taking an interest in something? Goodness, we can't let this opportunity go to waste. Give me just a moment. The door closed. Shortly after, it swung open again, and the Superior emerged carrying her ring of keys. The unmistakable jingle sent a shiver up my spine. We took the stairs up to the second floor and continued down the hall. The huge door that had slammed and scared the sisters all witless was to my left. The wind was shaking it gently. As gently as something that big could shake, at the very least. The walls around us seemed to pulse and vibrate as the door beat against its frame, as if we were in some great behemoth's lungs. As we turned to the right, I remembered the hideous carving Margaret had shown me with a jolt. Perhaps we really were in the presence of some monstrous creature. I thought about warning the Superior about the evil magic circle I had seen, but I could find neither the words nor the courage to bring that up. We stopped at the door. I stared at the hagioscope as the Superior looked for the right key. It was a bizarre device. I never really looked at it from the outside, but it looked rather cobbled together. The metal frame was wedged into the stone brick, and the little door looked ready to rust right off its hinges. My heart sank as I realized it was impossible to see through into the cell from this side. There was no way that Catherine and I would have ever been able to see each other. The hole in the wall was big enough to pass the books I needed for transcribing through one at a time, but there was a bend in the middle that prevented direct access. It made me realize just how thick these stone walls were, how isolated I had truly been. I spoke into the hatch. Hello. Feeling nostalgic? Ah, here we are. She selected a key and inserted it into the door. The door lurched open. Oh, how embarrassing. What happened? Nothing. I just forget which way some of the doors open here. She stepped inside. With great trepidation, I followed. It was just as it had been left. I took a deep breath. I felt lightheaded. I went to the shelf and procured a wooden box from the bottom. I could hear the ink bottles rattling inside. This is all I needed. Thank you. Very well. Shall we? I nodded. I didn't want to spend any longer in this place. I was not sure exactly how close the evil symbol was to my cell, but I wanted to put as much distance between it and myself as possible. I turned around and froze. There was something on my bed that should not be there. The half-finished copy of Matthew was sitting there. Spotted something else you need? No, just... This isn't where I left this. The book? Are you sure? I'm positive. You must be mistaken. I have the only key for this room. Perhaps you were reading it when Catherine came to collect you and forgot to put it back? That is not possible. I picked the book up and placed it on top of the box I was carrying. What is it? It's the last book I was writing before... Well, I see. Goodness, it's in rough shape. It looks as if it wasn't properly covered in the card ride up to the Abbey. James's actual crime may have been negligence. Nonetheless, I understand it must have some sentimental value. May I take it? I don't see why not. You can take anything from here, as far as I'm concerned. I see no reason why this room should be locked at all anymore, to tell you the truth. I nodded. I wasn't about to explain that this book appearing on my bed felt like some sort of supernatural threat. At the very least, unfettered access to my old books was a happy outcome. If I could ever brave coming back here again, that is. We left the room and traveled back through the halls. The Superior left to return to her office, no doubt swamped with clerical work. I stopped off by the dormitory to deposit the bedraggled book in my new sleeping quarters. Flora looked highly irritated when I finally made it back to the rectory. I had been worrying about the book, my cell, and that vile sigil all the way there. But my fear was quickly pushed out of my mind by Flora's verbal assault. You said you'd only be a few minutes. I'm so sorry. I just had to get the Superior to help me unlock the door to my old cell. I lifted up the box of supplies and rattled it gently. Oh, fair enough. Well, I brought some parchment. Oh, good. I would have been very embarrassed if I had had to make another trip. Flora shrugged and hopped up the stairs to the door. She had laid out 2 piles of simple paper. I set the box down between them and began unloading my supplies, inks, gold paint, and a few horsehair brushes. I pulled a chair out and sat down. Flora followed suit. So, where should we start? That's what I was going to ask you. Well, what's a moment from the Bible you'd like to try illuminating? I always like doing the Annunciation, or... that might be a little advanced for me. Oh, well, how about a letter? Just one letter? That's going a bit far in the other direction, don't you think? Not at all. There's a lot you can do with just one letter. Huh. Okay, then. What letter would be good to start with? I suppose T is always useful, or A. Flora snickered. Sure. Let's go with A, then. You don't sound particularly enthused. It's a letter. I rummaged around in my box of supplies and produced 2 hardened charcoal stubs. I handed one to Flora, who raised her eyebrows. Where did you get these? You know, I'm not sure. They got passed to me through the squint whenever I got new supplies. They're much nicer than the ones I usually have. I didn't know what to say to this, so I plowed ahead. I took one of the pieces of paper and began to sketch out a square in the top left corner. The paper was rougher and thinner than the parchment I was typically used to. I'd only held paper a few times and never marked it. That's not an A. We're just putting a square down so we know where to fit the letter. Oh. She took up the stick of charcoal and hastily drew a square. It was a bit squiggly. All right. So now, what I would do is, well, I wasn't sure how to verbally describe my process, so I instead began to draw. Is this going to turn into a YouTube tutorial halfway through? In a quick scoop, I outlined a large A in my square that touched all edges of the square, but left plenty of room for artistic embellishment. Flora squinted at my page, then attempted to follow suit. This is brought to you by the letter A. Well, now what? Well, typically, I'd ink the letter first and let it set. I don't do much of the detail work with the charcoal, it's a bit too thick for that. I peered into my supply box, wiggling my fingers. What color would you like your letter to be? Red? Blue? Why are you talking to me like I'm a weird baby? Am I? Yes. You know I'm almost 20, right? You don't need to do this performance for everything. I wasn't aware that I was performing. Yeah, that's my job, thank you very much. Right, I had forgotten just how good Flora was at getting under my skin. My empathy toward her outbursts in the Misericorde had overridden my usual distaste for her attitude. Oh right, I forgot you suck! Just talk to me normally. This is how I talk to people normally. Oh, come off it. Everything you say is a question, even if you're not actually asking anything. Oh, is that how I come across? We glared at each other for a moment, but Flora eventually started giggling. Just like that. Oh, I laughed too. I couldn't help it. Happily, the tension seemed to have been released. I guess that's how you normally speak. Should Hedwig have sounded like this the entire time, where her voice is going up like it sounds like she's asking a question at the end of every sentence? You know, I haven't spoken to many people face to face. Oh, yeah. That makes sense. I feel a bit like an asshole now. Oh, that's quite all right. Red or blue? Blue. I passed her the blue and took the red one for myself, then laid out 2 inkwells from the box. I popped the lid of mine open, then procured 2 brushes. Flora was struggling to pull the cork out of her bottle of blue ink. Be careful opening that, it's... Ugh! She had managed to get the cork out, but in doing so had jostled the bottle forward forcefully. A splash of blue ink landed on her sheet of paper. Here, let me. I reached over and picked her page up, curling it and shaking it in an attempt to get some of the ink back into the bottle on the table. I was moderately successful, but there was a blue streak left on the paper. Sorry. It's not a problem. Just be careful, the ink is quite valuable. I said I was sorry. I poured some of my red ink into a well, then dipped a brush in. Try and follow the lines with as few strokes as possible. That way, it dries without a messy-looking texture. I tried to demonstrate, but the paper was soaking up more of the ink than I was used to, rendering this lesson a little moot. I forged ahead anyway, until I had a satisfactory letter A on my page. Flora had been peering over my shoulder as I drew, and left to try on her own page once I had finished. She immediately put too much ink on her brush, and the beginning of her first line became a messy blob as a result. I could tell that she was rushing this part, but didn't want to frustrate her any further. Not bad. Shall we do some detailing with the gold paint? I could immediately sense Flora perking up. I uncorked the gold and chose a very thin brush. I like to make little patterns. And you can cheat a little bit if you focus on drawing on one half like this. You can just copy it on the other side. That's still drawing 2 very detailed things. I don't think that's much of a cheat. Just give it a try. Okay. How do you do that, though? Are those just random lines? I think of them as vines. Do it for the vine, as the kids say in 5 centuries. Huh. Well, that makes sense, I guess. That's a good start. Keep filling it in. I sat and watched her fill in the square with gold lines. No patterns really ever came together, and I could tell she wasn't enjoying herself. I tried to avoid staring. I knew that I wouldn't appreciate having my shoulder looked over in my cell, and Flora was liable to bite my head off if I did anything that could be interpreted as condescending. Ugh. So, what got you interested in art? I don't know. Did Catherine draw much? A bit. And she was going to teach you at one point before... Yup. What sort of things did she paint? Lots. Anything you particularly liked? Sure. There was this one she showed me that I really liked. Oh? Yeah, it was her holding some guy's head. What? It was so awesome. Whose head was it? No idea. Goodness. It was probably Hall of Ferns, though. I breathed a little internal sigh of relief. Of course. Do you like that story? Yeah, it's awesome. Judith is a very interesting book. Have you read the whole thing? No, just the gory parts. I resisted the urge to bang my own head against the table. Well, technically that would be violence against yourself, Hedwig. You don't want to do that. But you know the general thrust of it, yes? Yeah, she pretends to be friends with Hollow Friends and then cuts his head off. Do you know why she cuts his head off? He was a bit of an asshole. How is your drawing coming along? I could hear that voice was a bit pitchier than normal. How's your drawing coming along? Flora leaned back in her chair and gestured at her paper. That's a great first attempt. It was sloppy, but earnestly, it wasn't so bad. I was certain I had done worse when I was first starting out. It still feels a bit empty. You could add something to one of the corners, maybe? Like what? What about a crucifix? Boring. The crucifix is not boring. It's 2 lines. I'm not being blasphemous, I just mean... you know, it's not exactly an exciting drawing. Oh, I don't know then. A bird? Put a bird on it? Do the kids still say that? Or a cat? Oh, that's a fine idea. Flora leaned forward in her seat again, looking very engaged all of a sudden. Yeah? Can you draw a cat? I don't think I've ever tried. How about we both try one separate from the illuminated letters and compare? Sure. We both started sketching with charcoal on our own papers. I tried to remember what cats look like. I found them cute, despite their reputations. I mean, how would you describe a cat to somebody who's never seen a cat? I'm like, it's cat-shaped, you know? I soon realized that I had only ever seen the one scampering out of the kitchen. I actually don't know if I've ever seen a cat up close now that I think about it. Really? Really, I just know of them, mostly. There are lions and leopards and so on in the Bible, but you never saw one before you became a nun? Oh, that was so long ago, I could scarcely remember if I had. So you weren't born here then? No. Where do you come from then? Trier. Hedwig von Trier? Wow, I never would have guessed from your accent. You sound very English. I've been here most of my life. Yeah, but you're twice as old as I am. Some people's accents stick even when they move. Like Adela. Moira and Catherine, too. First of all, I am not that much older than you. Do you remember much before you moved? How long ago was it? Almost 20 years ago. Wow. So you were in there for as long as I've been alive? Yes. So you were like 20 before you moved and still lost your accent? I would have been about 5 or 6, thank you very much. Oh. Or, well, 7 or 8 or 9, maybe. It would be funny if you brought the accent back for a day or two. Just confuse everyone for a bit. Hello, my name is Hedwig. Hello, my name is Hedwig. We must annex the Sudetenland. Something like that. I smacked my charcoal down on the table in exasperation. My cat drawing as finished as it was ever going to get. Let's compare our drawings now, shall we? That's the thumbnail. That's the thumbnail. I don't know what episode this is going to be when I upload this, but that is the thumbnail for whatever episode this is going to be. Let's know what a cat looks like. I tried my best. That's the other half of the thumbnail. Like the one before, that's going to be the right side. This is going to be the left side. Future me, get on it. Is that what a cat looks like? It's closer than yours. Yours is a very human face. So does yours. Whatever. Cat eyes don't look like that. Is that so? Yeah, they think so at least. They never sit still long enough for people to draw them. Flora, do you know something about that cat Angela's been chasing for weeks? Look, you have to promise not to tell anyone. I honestly felt relieved. Compared to the secrets I was keeping for Catherine the Superior and myself, Flora's request was positively quaint. Of course. It's just a cat. Yes, but nearly everyone else here hates cats. I have to pretend they're vermin too, but he's such a sweet little thing. He? Oh, the cat. His name is Campy. That's unique. Catherine picked it. Oh. Perhaps I was wrong about the simplicity of this promise if I was tacitly protecting a dead woman's secret as well. The full name's Campignon? Campinian? Something like that. She liked fancy classical sounding names a lot. So the cat was hers? Yeah, I guess. I don't know if you could really call him anyone's cat. Yeah, You don't really own a cat. It's just that the cat has decided to spend most of its time around you because that's easy access to food. He just showed up one day and took a liking to Catherine, and she gave him a name and fed him scraps and stuff. And now he's your charge. Yup. That's sweet. I meant it when I said I need you to promise not to tell anyone. Some of that lot are likely to give Campy a swift kick if he gets too close. I'd be in so much trouble if anyone found out. Don't worry. I can keep a secret. Thanks. She looked away as she said this, and her face showed not even a hint of a smile. But I still felt good. I felt like I had made a real connection. It must be nice to have something to remember Catherine by. Well, shall we finish for now? I guess. Should we plan on meeting up again for more practice soon? She shrugged and glanced at her papers. Maybe. And here, take these. I handed her the sticks of charcoal. For practicing on your own. Since you like to draw. All right. Maybe I hadn't made as real a connection as I had hoped. And, just let me know if you ever want another lesson, and we can plan for it. Sure. She scooped up her drawing and stuffed it into her robe, and got up to leave without pushing her chair back in. Bye, Hedvig. Bye, Hedvig! Have a good evening, Flora. I was left alone to pack my supplies up. I had to resist snapping one of the brushes in half.